The Galactic Transport Authority had 3 rules that were supposedly unbreakable. Don't lose the cargo, don't lose the ship, and definitely don't lose both on an uncharted planet in the middle of nowhere. The crew of the freight hauler Mediocre Expectations had managed to violate all 3 with what could only be described as spectacular incompetence mixed with cosmically bad luck. The ship had been carrying agricultural equipment, prefab housing modules, and approximately 200 tons of bureaucratic paperwork, destined for a colony world that probably didn't want any of it. What it hadn't been carrying was a functional quantum drive regulator, because someone in maintenance had decided that warning light was more of a suggestion than an actual warning. The result was a catastrophic cascade failure that turned a routine 6-day journey into an unplanned descent through the atmosphere of a planet that wasn't even supposed to be there according to the navigational charts. The crash was less of a landing and more of a controlled collision with reality. The ship skipped across the ocean like a stone thrown by an angry god, shedding hull plating and cargo containers before finally slamming into a rocky island with enough force to wake up whatever passed for wildlife on this soggy rock. When the smoke cleared and the steam stopped hissing, 37 humans crawled out of the wreckage, took one look at their surroundings, and collectively realized that their day had gone from bad to monumentally worse. The island itself was roughly 5 kilometers across, covered in dense vegetation that looked vaguely purple in the light of the too bright sun, and surrounded by an ocean that stretched to every horizon. No cities, no roads, no convenient rescue stations with coffee and bathroom facilities. Just water, rocks, alien trees, and the smoking remains of a ship that would never fly again. Marcus Kane, the chief engineer, stood knee-deep in surf and stared at the wreckage with the expression of a man watching his professional reputation sink into the ocean. He was 43, balding, and had the permanently tired look of someone who'd spent 20 years fixing things that other people broke. "Well," he said to nobody in particular, "at least my ex-wife can't say I never took her anywhere tropical." "This isn't tropical," replied Dmitry Volkov, the pilot who'd somehow kept them alive during the descent. He was younger, cockier, and currently trying to wring seawater out of his flight jacket. "Tropical implies vacation. This is more like involuntary relocation with a high probability of death." The Galactic Transport Authority had 3 rules that were supposedly unbreakable: don't lose the cargo, don't lose the ship, and definitely don't lose both on an uncharted planet in the middle of nowhere. The crew of the freight hauler Mediocre Expectations had managed to violate all 3 with what could only be described as spectacular incompetence mixed with cosmically bad luck. The ship had been carrying agricultural equipment, prefab housing modules, and approximately 200 tons of bureaucratic paperwork, destined for a colony world that probably didn't want any of it. What it hadn't been carrying was a functional quantum drive regulator, because someone in maintenance had decided that warning light was more of a suggestion than an actual warning. The result was a catastrophic cascade failure that turned a routine 6-day journey into an unplanned descent through the atmosphere of a planet that wasn't even supposed to be there according to the navigational charts. The crash was less of a landing and more of a controlled collision with reality. The ship skipped across the ocean like a stone thrown by an angry god, shedding hull plating and cargo containers before finally slamming into a rocky island with enough force to wake up whatever passed for wildlife on this soggy rock. When the smoke cleared and the steam stopped hissing, 37 humans crawled out of the wreckage, took one look at their surroundings, and collectively realized that their day had gone from bad to monumentally worse. The island itself was roughly 5 kilometers across, covered in dense vegetation that looked vaguely purple in the light of the too bright sun, and surrounded by an ocean that stretched to every horizon. No cities, no roads, no convenient rescue stations with coffee and bathroom facilities. Just water, rocks, alien trees, and the smoking remains of a ship that would never fly again. Marcus Kane, the chief engineer, stood knee-deep in surf and stared at the wreckage with the expression of a man watching his professional reputation sink into the ocean. He was 43, balding, and had the permanently tired look of someone who'd spent 20 years fixing things that other people broke. "Well," he said to nobody in particular, "at least my ex-wife can't say I never took her anywhere tropical." "Always the optimist," muttered Kenji Nakamura, the logistics officer who'd spent the last 10 minutes having a quiet panic attack behind a piece of debris. He was ex-military, which meant he was excellent at planning for disasters but terrible at actually experiencing them. His hands were shaking as he pulled out a waterlogged datapad and tried to take inventory of their situation. "Okay, so we've got approximately 37 survivors, maybe 40% of the cargo is salvageable, and we're on a planet that's not even in the database. Anyone want to guess how long until rescue?" 3 days, said Dimitri confidently. 3 weeks, countered Marcus. 3 months if we're lucky, added Priya Kapoor, the ship's botanist, as she examined a nearby plant with professional interest. She was in her 50s, had soil under her fingernails even in space, and spoke to vegetation more than she spoke to people. "These are definitely Earth-adjacent species. Someone terraformed this place, which means it's in somebody's database. They just need to check the right database. So we're lost in someone's filing cabinet," said Marcus. "Fantastic." The first week was what experts would call a complete disaster, and what the survivors would later call character building. They managed to erect crude shelters using hull plating and cargo netting, which kept the rain off but did nothing for comfort. The water was drinkable, which was good. The local wildlife was curious but not immediately hostile, which was better. And the ship's galley had remained mostly intact, which meant Anton Belisar, the cook, could continue his life's work of turning freeze-dried ingredients into meals that technically qualified as edible. Anton was a broad man with an impressive mustache and the philosophical outlook of someone who'd cooked for crews that complained about everything. "In zero gravity," he announced while stirring a pot of something that might have been soup, "food floats. Here it just sits in pot like sad prisoner. But at least gravity means spices fall down instead of up nose. Is improvement." "Your standards are impressively low," observed Yuki Tanaka, the ship's medic, as she sorted through salvaged medical supplies. She was efficient, no nonsense, and had already treated 17 cases of cuts, bruises and wounded pride. "Is not low standards," Anton replied. "Is adaptive expectations." The first attempt at building a boat came on day 9 and resulted in what would forever be known as the raft incident that nobody mentions. Marcus had designed it, Dimitri had built it, and Kenji had calculated the weight distribution. All 3 of them ended up swimming back to shore while the raft sank like it had a personal grudge against buoyancy. They didn't talk about it. They especially didn't talk about how Priya had watched from the beach and said, "Told you that wood was too dense." But humans, for all their flaws, had one trait that confused every other species in the galaxy. They were absolutely terrible at giving up. Where a sensible species would have sat down and waited for rescue, humans looked at a disaster and saw a project. By the end of the second week, the survivors had established a proper camp with organized shelters, a communal cooking area, and something resembling a latrine system that Kenji had designed with military precision. Priya had taken the salvaged agricultural seeds and started a garden in a clearing near fresh water. She talked to the plants constantly, which everyone pretended not to notice. "You see, the soil here has excellent drainage," she explained to a row of seedlings, "and the mineral content is actually better than the colony world we were heading to. You're going to love it here." "She knows they can't hear her, right?" whispered Lena Fisher, the junior engineer to Marcus. "Don't care," Marcus replied, watching Priya work. "If she can grow food, she can have full conversations with the dirt for all I care." The Galactic Transport Authority, meanwhile, was having its own crisis approximately 40 light-years away. The Mediocre Expectations had missed its check-in, which triggered a standard search protocol. Unfortunately, standard search protocols involved 17 different departments, 43 forms, and at least 6 committees that needed to approve the expenditure of resources. The humans had been missing for 3 weeks before anyone actually started looking in the right sector. Junior Administrator Zixthar, a centaurian with 4 eyes and a bureaucratic soul, stared at the search grid with growing concern. "They're not in any of the approved shipping lanes. Have we checked the unapproved shipping lanes?" asked his supervisor, Senior Administrator Corlix. "There are no unapproved shipping lanes. That's why they're unapproved. Then check the space where unapproved shipping lanes would be if they existed." Zixthar's third eye twitched. "That's literally everywhere else." "Exactly. Start there." Back on the island, the survivors had moved past survival and into the early stages of settlement. Marcus had successfully reverse-engineered a proper boat design using a combination of wreckage materials and local timber. The first one worked. The second one worked better. By the 5th boat, they had a small fleet capable of fishing and coastal exploration. "See?" Dmitri said proudly, standing beside the vessels. "I told you I could build anything." "You literally sank the first one in under 2 minutes. Kenji reminded him. "That was a learning experience. These are success experiences, very different." The fishing expeditions proved successful beyond anyone's expectations. The ocean was full of creatures that looked vaguely fish-like and tasted surprisingly good when Anton applied his particular brand of culinary creativity. They established regular fishing routes, built drying racks for preservation, and even started experimenting with what Marcus called aquaculture and everyone else called those weird fish pens near the rocks. The gardens expanded rapidly under Priya's obsessive care. She'd managed to cultivate not just the salvaged earth crops, but also several local plants that turned out to be edible and nutritious. "It's all about communication," she explained to Yuki while harvesting something that looked like purple carrots. "You listen to what the plants need, and they tell you. Plants don't talk, Priya. Not with words, obviously, but they communicate. Wilting leaves mean water stress. Yellow discoloration means nitrogen deficiency. It's a conversation. That's just observation. Observation is conversation. You doctors are so literal." By month 2, the settlement had taken on characteristics that went beyond mere survival. Shelters had become houses, with doors, windows salvaged from the ship, and in one case actual curtains that Lena had sewn from cargo netting. The communal area had expanded into something resembling a village square, with the cooking area at the center, surrounded by workshop spaces, storage structures, and even a small amphitheater where people gathered in the evenings. They'd established routines, assigned roles, and created systems that would have impressed a colonial administrator if any colonial administrators had been present. Kenji ran the whole operation with military efficiency, maintaining schedules for everything from fishing expeditions to garden maintenance to boat repairs. He'd even created a duty roster, which everyone followed because the alternative was chaos. The Galactic Transport Authority finally located the crash site after 5 weeks of searching, mostly by accident, when a survey ship noticed unusual electromagnetic signatures from the wreckage. They dispatched a science vessel to investigate because rescue ships required additional paperwork. The Valdorian research team approached the planet with scientific curiosity and a complete lack of urgency. Lead researcher Tomek studied the preliminary scans with his species characteristic analytical detachment. Confirmed debris pattern consistent with atmospheric entry failure. Life signs detected. Approximately 37 humans. Condition, asked his assistant. Unclear. They appear to be mobile, so they survived. Yes, but they're not displaying typical distress behavior. They're moving with purpose. Building things. Building what? Tomek adjusted the scanners. Structures, multiple structures, and watercraft. Several watercraft. How long have they been there? 5 weeks. And they've built multiple structures and boats in 5 weeks. The assistant's translator conveyed something like bewilderment. That seems excessive for survival needs. Indeed, most species would have established a basic shelter and waited for rescue. These humans appear to be nesting. Down on the island, the survivors were having a town meeting, which was their euphemism for an organized argument in the square. The topic was whether to build a dock or expand the garden first. The dock is infrastructure, Marcus argued. It supports everything else we're doing. Food is infrastructure. Priya countered. You can't eat a dock. You can't transport food without boats, and boats need docks. Boats need water. Docks are optional. Plants need soil. Gardens need space. Not optional. Kenji held up his hands for peace. We can do both. Dock crew works mornings. Garden crew works afternoons. We rotate personnel every 3 days to prevent boredom, finished Dimitri. He means boredom. He's too polite to say we'll get bored doing one thing. I was going to say skill stagnation. That's just fancy boredom. They built both. The dock extended 20 meters into the bay, constructed from salvaged metal supports and local timber, with proper cleats for mooring boats and a cleaning station for processing fish. The garden expanded to nearly 1/2 hectare, with organized rows of crops, irrigation channels that Marcus had engineered, and even a small greenhouse made from transparent hull sections. Anton established what he grandly called the restaurant, which was really just the cooking area, with some tables, but he'd painted a sign and everything. He'd started experimenting with local ingredients, creating dishes that combined human recipes with alien vegetation. Some were good, some were memorable, all were edible, which Anton considered a success. Today's special is grilled fish with purple root vegetable and spicy sauce made from that plant. Priya said wouldn't kill us, he announced during dinner service. She said probably wouldn't kill us, corrected Yuki. Is same thing with more words. The Valdorian research ship entered orbit on day 43, and Tomek immediately activated detailed scanners to assess the survivor's condition. What he saw made all 4 of his eyes blink in sequence, which was his species' equivalent of saying, "What the hell?" The settlement had organized streets, actual streets, laid out in a grid pattern. The structures were no longer crude shelters but proper buildings with obvious functions: residential, storage, workshop, communal. The gardens were extensive and clearly producing crops. The waterfront had a dock and multiple boats. There was even what appeared to be a marketplace area with designated stalls. They've built a village, his assistant said unnecessarily. They've built a village, Tomek confirmed. In 6 weeks, on a planet they crashed on. A village. Should we contact them? I suppose we should inform them they're being observed. The communication came through on salvaged ship equipment that Marcus had repaired. A Valdorian face appeared on the screen, looking confused. This is research vessel cautious inquiry to human survivors of freight vessel Mediocre Expectations. We have located your position and are preparing rescue protocols. What is your immediate status? Marcus, Kenji, and Dimitri looked at each other. Finally, Marcus spoke. Our status? We're fine. Fine? Tomic's translator made it sound like a question and an accusation simultaneously. Yeah, we've got food, water, shelter. Weather's been decent. Could use some coffee, but otherwise we're managing. You crashed 6 weeks ago. Has it been that long? Time flies when you're building infrastructure. Tomic looked at something off-screen. You've constructed approximately 30 structures, multiple watercraft, and extensive agricultural installations. Well, yeah, we needed somewhere to live and something to eat. Seemed logical. Most species would have waited for rescue. Marcus shrugged. We're not most species. Also, waiting seemed boring. The rescue mission turned into an observation mission, which turned into a case study, which turned into a minor galactic incident when other species heard about the humans who'd turned a crash site into a functioning settlement in 6 weeks. Scientific observers from 7 different species requested permission to visit and study human behavioral patterns in crisis situations. The Galactic Transport Authority, meanwhile, was drowning in paperwork. How do you classify a crash site that's no longer a crash site? Is it a settlement? Does it need a colonial charter? Who owns the planet? If nobody owns it, do the humans own it now? These questions required 17 committees and 48 subcommittees to even begin addressing. By month 3, the village had approximately 60 buildings, including a proper clinic that Yuki had designed, a workshop complex, where Marcus and his team built and repaired everything from boats to farming tools, and residential structures that had actual personality. People had decorated. Lena had carved designs into door frames. Someone had painted murals on the communal hall. Anton's restaurant had a menu board. They'd even established holidays. The first was We Didn't Die Day, celebrating the anniversary of the crash. The second was the Raft Incident Memorial Day, which everyone celebrated by not talking about the raft incident. The third was Garden Appreciation Day, which Priya had absolutely lobbied for, and everyone else went along with, because arguing with Priya about plants was pointless. Trade routes had been established between different parts of the coastline. The fishing crews had mapped the entire bay system, identifying the best spots for different species. The agricultural teams had seed saved and were planning next season's crops. Someone had even started brewing something alcoholic from fermented local fruit, which tasted terrible but got the job done. The alien observers filed increasingly baffled reports. Humans weren't supposed to be this adaptable. They were supposed to be fragile, short-lived creatures that needed specific conditions to survive. Instead, they'd taken a disaster and turned it into a functioning society with apparent enthusiasm. They're having festivals, one report noted. Voluntary festivals celebrating arbitrary dates. They've named everything, another observed. The boats have names, the buildings have names. There's a rock near the dock they call Steve, for reasons nobody can explain. Their social cohesion is abnormal, a third concluded. They should be fractured, competing for resources. Instead, they're cooperating and appear to be enjoying themselves. The rescue fleet finally arrived on day 87, cutting through bureaucratic red tape with the kind of urgency that only appears when something becomes embarrassing for multiple governments. They sent a shuttle down, expecting desperate survivors ready to evacuate immediately. Instead, they found Dimitri waiting at the dock wearing a flower crown that someone had made, standing next to a sign that said, "Welcome to Paradise Cove, population 37, no vacancy." Asked the Centaurian rescue coordinator, staring at the sign. "We voted on it," Dimitri explained. "Beat out Crash Landing Bay and should have checked the regulator island. Democracy in action." The rescue coordinator looked past him at the village. You've been here for 3 months. Has it been 3? Feels shorter. We've been busy. So we see. The coordinator consulted a datapad. Our mission is to evacuate you to the nearest station, where you'll receive medical care and be reassigned. Reassigned? Yes. New crew positions. You've all been marked as survivors of catastrophic failure. There will be counseling. Dmitri turned and shouted toward the village. They want to evacuate us and send us to counseling. The response was immediate and unanimous. Laughter. Not polite laughter. Full-throated, genuine amusement that echoed across the bay. Marcus walked down from the workshop, wiping his hands on a rag. Evacuate us from what, exactly? From this crash site. You mean our village? It's not a village. It's a temporary survival settlement. We've got a restaurant, Marcus said, and a library. Lena organized all the salvaged datapads. We have culture. That's a village. Kenji emerged from the communal hall with his ever-present datapad. We've actually filed preliminary colonial claim paperwork with the Galactic Settlement Bureau. Did that last week. Haven't heard back yet, but the bureaucracy is probably backed up. The rescue coordinator's translator made a sound that probably meant something between confusion and disbelief. You're claiming this planet. Just this island, Kenji clarified. We're not greedy. But we've made improvements, established permanent settlement, and demonstrated sustainable resource management. According to colonial law, that gives us claim rights. You crashed here, and then we lived here. Successfully. That's kind of the point of colonization. The coordinator looked around at the village, the boats, the gardens, the dock. You built all this in 3 months. Well, yeah, said Marcus. What else were we going to do? Sit around complaining? Most species would have waited for rescue. Most species aren't us. The town meeting that evening was the most well-attended yet. The entire population of Paradise Cove gathered in the square while Anton served grilled fish and Priya's vegetables. The rescue coordinator stood awkwardly to one side, still trying to understand what was happening. So here's the situation, Kenji announced. We have 3 options. 1. Accept immediate evacuation and return to our previous lives. 2. Accept delayed evacuation and wait for colonial charter approval. 3. Tell them we're fine and they can leave without us. I vote 3, said Dmitri immediately. You haven't heard the details of the other options, the coordinator protested. Don't need to. I like it here. Built a house, has a view. You built a house in 3 months and you're emotionally attached to it. Obviously, has a porch. The vote was 34-3 in favor of staying. The 3 who voted to leave were mostly worried about families back home, and even they admitted the island had grown on them. Kenji negotiated with the rescue coordinator for supplies, communication equipment, and official recognition of their colonial claim. The coordinator, defeated by human stubbornness and increasingly suspicious that his superiors would blame him for this situation, agreed. This is highly irregular. That's basically our species' motto, Marcus replied cheerfully. The rescue fleet departed 3 days later, leaving behind supplies, equipment, and a bewildered crew filing reports that would become required reading in xenopsychology courses across the galaxy. The case study of Paradise Cove would be analyzed by researchers for decades, how a catastrophic failure transformed into successful colonization, driven entirely by humans' apparent inability to recognize when they were supposed to give up. On the island, life continued. Boats were launched at dawn. Gardens were tended through morning. The workshop hummed with repairs and improvements. Anton experimented with new recipes. Priya had conversations with increasingly productive crops. Yuki treated the occasional minor injury, and declared everyone disgustingly healthy for disaster survivors. 6 months after the crash, Paradise Cove had a population of 42. 5 researchers had requested transfer to study human adaptability in situ, fallen in love with the place, and simply stayed. The village had expanded to include a proper school building, though there were no children yet, and a community center with a library. Marcus stood on the dock at sunset, watching the fishing boats return. Dmitri joined him, carrying 2 cups of Anton's latest brewing experiment. "Think they ever figured out what went wrong with the ship?" Dmitri asked. "Probably the quantum regulator," Marcus replied. "Should have been replaced at the last station. So basically, a maintenance oversight crashed us on an uncharted island where we built a thriving village from scratch." That's one interpretation. What's the other? Marcus sipped his drink, made a face, and sipped again. "Best thing that ever happened to us." Dmitri laughed. "You know what the really funny part is? We were hauling prefab colonial structures to some planet that didn't want them. Now we've built an actual colony without them. Universe has a sense of humor. Either that, or we're too stupid to know when we're beaten. Could be both." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over Paradise Cove. Somewhere in the village, someone started playing music on a salvaged entertainment system. Smoke rose from Anton's restaurant. Lights flickered on in the residential buildings as people finished their work for the day. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson about humanity. Give them a disaster, and they'd turn it into a home. Give them nothing, and they'd build something. Tell them to wait, and they'd start construction. It wasn't optimism exactly, or even stubbornness. It was something uniquely human, the absolute refusal to accept that circumstances were supposed to defeat them. The Galactic Transport Authority updated its operational manual after the Paradise Cove incident. Rule 4 was added to the original 3. If transporting humans, expect the unexpected, and expect them to build something while they're expecting it. Back on the island, nobody cared about the manual. They were too busy living on a planet they'd accidentally colonized, in a village they'd built from disaster, proving once again that humanity's greatest survival trait wasn't intelligence or strength. It was the stubborn, beautiful insistence on making the best of absolutely everything, whether the universe liked it or not. And somewhere in the gardens, Priya was explaining to the vegetables that next season they'd try expanding into that western clearing, because Paradise wasn't finished yet. It was just getting started.